Welcome to DIYEasyCrafts.com. How to make a carved wood seagull. Now, this particular carved wooden seagull is a little bit smaller than the real bird. I made it in probably about half the size, and it was actually designed to fit on top of a nautical desk that I made, or a nautical computer stand that I made. It's a very easy project. You don't have to be an artist. In fact, all you have to do is have some basic woodworking tools. I started by just downloading a photograph of a seagull off the internet and enlarging that photograph to the size of the carving that I wanted to end up with. I then cut out the outline of the bird, and then I'm just going to use that as a template and sketch that outline onto some pieces of 1-inch pine. I think these are about 1x10s, but any size that you want depending on the size of the bird that you want to end up with. Now there's a few ways of doing this. Now I cut out 4 shapes or outlines of the seagull and then kind of glued and clamped them together. In hindsight, it probably would have been a little bit easier to just glue the 4 pieces of pine together and then cut out with a long jigsaw blade the shape of the bird. But either way, you end up with the exact same result. You want to end up with a thickness of wood that's thick enough for whatever size carving that you're going to do. So in this case, 4 pieces of 1-inch pine was more than thick enough for the body and the wings of the seagull. Now what I did was, after I glued it together and clamped it and let it dry basically overnight, I went back and I put the drawing back on, drew the outline, and then I'm just going to use a angle grinder with a flap sanding wheel. These things can move a lot of material very quickly, especially if you have a real coarse grit. I think this one's about a 40, but it's a very, very well-worn 40. I've done quite a few projects with that same sanding disc. But even if you had an 80 grit flap sanding wheel, that would go through this material very quickly. And with just a little bit of practice, you can really control that disc grinder so that you're not sanding away anything other than the material you want to remove. Now I did just sketch out the shape of the seagull's body from a top view, and I'm also going to use that same grinding disc or sanding disc to carve away the sides. And with that same flap sanding wheel, I will also start to round over all of the edges just to give the bird the body and neck shape. And all we're doing here is just roughing that shape down to those pre-drawn outline marks. Once I get it to the basic desired size, then I move over to a Dremel grinder. I really like to use these little drum sanding wheels. They're just a very quick way of removing a lot of material. You can control the amount that it grinds or that it sands away pretty easily. I'm also using about an 80 grit sanding disc here, and I'm going to use this to round over all of the edges on the neck, under the beak, and the piece now can really start to take that bird shape and have the curves. So you start to lose some of those rough edges. At this point, and actually a few times during the process, I went to an oscillating sander, nothing finer than an 80. I just very quickly went over the whole bird with the sander and just smoothed out as many edges as I could. Then it was time to add a little bit of detail. So once I got the head basically shaped, I drew up another picture which kind of highlights the detail on the bird's face or on the bird's head. And I just used a pencil to draw in the beak details of where the head comes into the beak and how the beak is curved down, even the little nostril on the beak as well as the eye. And you can see I also drew in the wings on either side of the bird. Then I'm going to use a Dremel grinder, and there's a variety of different tools, woodworking tools that you can get for the Dremel. You have some small straight tools that do a real nice job of just going over each one of those lines. So you can either cut a groove in the line, or you can reduce the thickness of the material next to the line. This is a little round bit that I really like. It moves material very quickly, and I'm just outlining the wing on the side of the bird. Just removing a little bit of material just so that it visually has a break between the body and the wing. You could actually do all of this just with the edge of that same little drum sanding wheel on the Dremel. This is that drum wheel. I went back over the whole thing just to smooth the transition area between where I ground with that round bit and the body. But then while I was at it, I added some additional detail onto the wing, just by adding a few little plunge cuts, little feather marks. Nothing fancy, just a few little grooves, just using the upper edge or the upper corner of that disc, of that sanding disc. And now I've just gone back to working on the head. I'm just going to add the beak nostrils again with a Dremel tool. And this whole bird, I did in an afternoon. I probably spent, other than gluing the wood together, I probably spent a couple hours. And just roughly sanding it. Now you could be as detailed as you want on this thing. I really just wanted, the basic shape of a seagull, so that when you look at it from a distance, it looks like a bird. For the legs, I found these white tubes at the local body shop. I think they're polypropylene. What's nice about them is that with a little bit of heat, you can bend them so you can give the seagull its knees or the knee shape, and you can also paint them. So here's the carving. It's been painted with just a base coat of white, just a water-based white paint. And now I'll add a little bit of detail. I also drilled two 3/16 holes in the bottom to add those legs. And then in order to do the feet, I just carved those out of a piece of 1/4-inch plywood, and then I sanded them down to be even thinner than the plywood. So basically the legs just run through holes in the feet. So whatever I mount this on, I basically just drill 2 holes, 3/16, and then I put those tubings right into the holes. And that's what holds the bird upright. I'm going to use a little bit of yellow paint on the beak, and I'm also going to paint both of the legs and both of the feet yellow. I can mix a little bit of brown or a little bit of black in with that paint, just to give it some different tones. For the wings, and again, I'm just going to keep looking back at the photographs, that I printed out. But for the wings, they're basically gray. I used a couple of different variations of gray, just to add a little bit more detail. And then I did go back over and add some very, very fine black lines for the mouth and the beak and the eye. Very, very basic, simple way of carving a wooden seagull. Here's some photographs of the finished product. I think I mentioned before that this particular bird was designed to be about half the size of a real seagull, and it's going to end up being mounted on the corner post or corner piling of a Nautical designed computer desk, which I made. You can see some of the different colors in the gray that I used just to simulate the wings. And that's the finished product. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I ask that you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Please check us out on the web at DIYEasyCrafts.com. Thank you very much.